I'm joined now by someone who has an incredible association with both visual and special effects, having started the BBC on series such as Doctor Who, Blake Seven, Tripods. I think he's done them all. So I would like to introduce Graham Brown. How are you?
That's a very, and I'm fine, and that's a very nice intro. Thank you. I like the sound of it. I haven't done everything, but I have done a lot. I've seen a lot. I've been and done and seen a lot. Not everything, but a lot. So yes, there's some truth in what you say.
So how aware were you of Doctor Who before working on it?
As a kid, I had hidden behind sofa from Doctor Who, the Zarbis. Zarbis, is that right? That sort of stuff. I'd hidden behind the sofa. I watched that Doctor Who on a black and white set, which was one of those old cabinet jobs. That went up into the parents' loft, and there it sat for many years. Then as a kind of full circle for me, for Walls of Fenric we needed the Ultima machine, was it? The Ultima machine. I've got the script somewhere. Here's my Walls of Fenric file. But the Ultima machine, it wanted a computer, and I thought, I know what I'm going to do. We need something that looks a bit period with valves. And I got that television out of the loft and I turned it into the Ultima machine. So the insides of the Ultima machine are the television that I first watched Doctor Who on. So yeah, I thought it was quite a nice story. For me, getting the television I first watched Doctor Who on into a Doctor Who as a thing, there's a sort of glowing flask in it, of green liquid, which was a mum roulette. It was the mum roulette. They used to do these things that looked a bit like, I suppose, well, sex toys, really. The roulette looked so. But I did away with the top bit, and the flask is actually fluorescein is in there. I've still got my little somewhere. I've got the fluorescein to make the green.
Well, I imagine having a handbook on any series is useful, but particularly something like Doctor Who, where there is such a heritage and a backstory. That must be very useful for cast and crew that perhaps don't know anything at all really about the series in some cases.
The new production crew would come in and they wouldn't know anything about Doctor Who. So that they had to work with the script and so on. So everything, it's all in here. The Doctor is a Time Lord from the planet Gallifrey, which is in the constellation of Castoboros. He possesses two hearts. So there's a whole bit. So for a director who'd never done Doctor Who needed to know something, you could look in this and it's all in here. But there doesn't seem to be any copies of this surviving. I've not seen anyone else waving one around, but which is why they asked to borrow it. Production paperwork. So it contains everything. First transmission form. Will assistants please note on all TX forms the following. We would prefer no verbal trails during the closing theme. If any are applicable, could they be done at the end of the completed programme? So there's sort of rules and stuff like that, but plus details like where the Doctor's from, because the director might not know. And so, they were sent home with this to have a little read of. Programming timings. Each completed programme, you know about timing? You do know about timings, I'm sure. As a producer, they're a nightmare. You've either got too much material or not enough. And then if you chip it out as a producer, when you've got too much, the thing doesn't make sense. Or if you haven't got enough, you find you're constantly cutting back to the bridge. Or can someone light a candle? We'll do some shots of a candle burning down. But yeah, so each completed program should run at 24 minutes, 15 seconds. An underrun is unacceptable. There we go, etc. So this sort of stuff's all in here.
So would it have been common for any production to give you a booklet like that, or was it just Doctor Who that did that?
There are these things exist in things like the Archers and so on. Yeah, these things do exist for long-running shows. Yes, so it's not that common, but for a long-running show, you need some sort of, especially in the days before digital, you needed some bits of paper for people to go and read, because otherwise they wouldn't know.
So when you start on a production, am I right in thinking that your sort of breakdown of what is needed is given to you in the form of a yellow form?
This is a yellow form. This is a yellow form for the Wolves of Fenric. And it says, it starts at the top. You can see the sort of stuff. But it says, Graham Brown has already been allocated to Doctor Who, and he has copies of all scripts As yet, I cannot confirm dates or whether it will be OB and studio or all OB. So this has come from, well, these were usually done by the assistant floor manager in those days, of which you had several. The roles have changed, but you had an assistant floor manager who looked after the artists, and you had an assistant floor manager who looked after the props. You didn't really have so many runners in those days. Now there are thousands of runners because they're cheap. So who did actually write this? Oh, here we are. So this is right. Someone's written many thanks, Judy. I might need more magnification for the written name. Judy, someone. Judy
Graham?
Judy Korf, it looks like. AFM, and there's her extension. So, yeah, it's written, where is it? Sorry, it's terribly difficult, you can't see round. Can you see that? No, I can't see. Yeah, there it is, yes, where my finger. Can't read the name. But so these things were written out. So the AFM would sit down and go through the scripts. You'd been allocated the show. You hadn't seen any scripts because she probably had the first copy, or the production had the first couple of copies. She read through it and she'd list, as you can see, all this stuff. So I will read you a bit relevant to, say, that thing. Oh, green toxin capsules. So that was what I made out of the mum roulette. Spark from Dakota. Episode 3, Spark from Dakota. Storm. Glowing flask. And it says scenes 7 and 11 need a glowing flask. What to do with the glowing flask? There we are. Glowing flask. And in fact, the bulbs, you can still see the little terminals where you put the wires in. It does still work. But I don't like to run it often because it's quite a job changing the bulb in there, as you can imagine. But that's the bulb that was on set. There was a couple of those. So yeah, so that's all I had. So there it is. Can you see there? Does that say, can you read that?
Yeah.
That's all I had. So that's all you got. I remember on Blake 7, the AFM running over. We were all sat in a lane. I think it was on that Mary Ridge episode. And there's a woman, I think it was Mary Ridge, on that episode, Space Rat. So we were all, it might have not been Space Rat. We were in a very famous location just inside the M25 near Oxshott. It was a location they used to chuck cars off cliffs for dramas, and we used it for Alien Planets quite a bit. There were so many cars chucked off this cliff that you could go and you could put together. I've got an old Jag outside from 1969 Jag I've had since about 1970, and I used to get my spares from Jags that were at the bottom of this cliff for that car that had been chucked off. But yeah, so this involved, we were doing Blake 7, we were all sat in this Range Rover in the pissing rain and cold, trying to keep warm. We got this Range Rover hire company. They sent this early days of Range Rovers, but and then the AFM ran over and said, "Have you got the I cannot remember, but the Cylon cylinder that goes in the flu
valve?"
And everyone looked at it. Has anyone made that? And so the most junior assistant on the team was told to get out of the car, go around, find anything he could in a toolbox. And I remember him spraying up a clothes peg and then wrapping it with tape. So he sprayed up this clothes peg, so wrapped it up with tape and got back in. Because I think we told the AFM to go, well, yeah, we got it somewhere. Give us 10 minutes, we'll find that for you. When do you need it? Oh, she said, it's in the scene after next. Yeah, come back 5. So, and then poor old Simon, the junior assistant, so we'd knocked this thing up. He was given the job of winding the window down. Actually, it probably was an electric window. Probably an early electric window. Anyway, the window went down to about that much. And this thing was passed out to this AFM. And she's looking at the window. We put the window back up because it was absolutely appalling. But obviously no one had made, it was just these lists, as you can see, they come in, they are extensive. So, but they don't say much. So there's pages and pages of these. So all just used to come in on this yellow form. There was one notorious BBC special effect, visual effects designer whose name might have come up somewhere. He was a real. He used to trundle. He used to pick. He was quite senior. He used to pick all the best jobs. So he'd be doing the job in Spain and just spend all the time, on the Costa or so, leaving the assistants to do all the work. running up bills, which he'd then leg it and not pay. But I remember witnessing a scene in studio from some quite powerful people saying, "So okay, where's the now we got the you know that we talked about the meeting, we wanted that thing, so," and he just completely forgotten to do it, absolutely forgotten to do it. And it was an afterthought, and it wasn't on the yellow form. And he said, "Oh, it wasn't on the yellow form, so I didn't make it." And he was also later on another occasion, I remember him saying, he said, "Well, I read it and I didn't think it was funny, so I didn't bother." So I assumed you wouldn't do it. That's just, which is probably why we have the reputation as being as visual defects. Those are actual quotes from a name I can give you.
So is it quite nice to really only be given a very vague description and to let your imagination run with it?
Well, hence us building that on the yellow. Shall I see what it's? I haven't read the yellow form, but let me see what it says on the yellow form. It might not say anything, but I don't know if there is anything on the yellow form, because we spent quite some time doing that, Andy Fraser and Can't see it at first glance. Dead Russian. There's Dead Russian on here. To be, everything says TBC. The Dead Russian was John Vanderpool. Because it needed to be dead. It turned out to be a dead Russian floating in the sea. Mist flask. No, it doesn't mention that. Quite why we. I think Nick might have asked us. I think Nick was quite keen. Nick Mallet, who directed that one.
And of course, Doctor Who, particularly at this time, had a very tight budget, so it must have been quite a challenge to achieve what was often very ambitious and demanding effects on screen.
No one had any money. Do you know how much the budget for the Doctor Who episode was? What is it? This one was 4 episodes, I think. Sometimes there were 6, sometimes there were 4. 4 episodes. That's 2 hours of telly, at least, maybe more. Depends if they were 40-minute or 25. But 2 hours. That's longer than Star Wars. And you're doing 2 hours of telly, and it's quite an effects-led show, and the budget was £6,000, out of which you had to pay for the hotels, the petrol, the bag of flour, the equipment, so and in theory the man hours.
And this would have been a time that, at 10 o'clock the studio lights get switched off and no overruns are allowed. Am I right in thinking?
You weren't allowed any overruns. You know that, don't you? Back in those days, that's why a script that was really good turned into a less than good product at the end, because poor script writers. Who wrote the script on that one? David? No, I think Nick helped with the script. So if you reached 10 o'clock in studio or 6 o'clock on location, John would say, right, well, that's it. All the plugs, no overruns. There isn't money for overruns. Stop. And then he'd go and say, right, well, we haven't shot that, and you shot that, and shot that, and shot that. You'll have to rewrite so that we can tell that bit of the story in the later bit. But obviously, as you got nearer the end, there was ever more story you hadn't shot, and less scenes left in which to squeeze the bits of story you hadn't shot in, or at least an explanation of what was going on, which is why some of them are incomprehensible, because you could not physically squeeze that in. And that was purely because, but this might not be, this shouldn't go out, because the trouble is, a strong producer, and I have been a producer, arguing for more money. If you ain't got enough to make the show, then you say we ain't got enough to make the show. But a lot of people didn't want to rock the boat, so didn't do that. Barry Letts would never have not shot everything that you needed, nor Sue Verity. And so you have to go and fight your corner. But if you're not so pushy, say, or perhaps a tiddly bit lackadaisical, or perhaps you've got other things on your mind, you might not go and have a nasty conversation with finance people and try and get more money. You might not bother. Then you just say, right, you've got to rewrite this bit to compensate for what's not there, which was very distressing, because if you used to read the scripts and think, oh, this is shit hot, this is brilliant, this is going to be better than anything we've ever seen. And then by the time you got to the finished product, you think, where all the scenes have been dropped that turned it into a lovely narrative, then you realise why some of those later ones didn't flow so well. And it was because you just hadn't shot the stuff, because there was no overruns, because someone wouldn't fight and say we need more money to make this.
I assume that wasn't just a problem for Doctor Who, it was across the BBC, was it?
It depends on the producer. It's purely dependent on the producer. You wouldn't catch Ken Trod not doing stuff because there was no money. It depends on entirely the producer and they had to fight the people to get more budget. And if they weren't up for that, then of course you at the sharp end was stuck. So, for instance, Pride and Prejudice, we had about £1 million. The Pride and Prejudice with Colin Firth, that famous one, which I did. We had ample money, more money than ever before on anything, and it looks it. That's why they're talking. That's why it's an iconic piece of TV, because it's we had the budget, because people had fought tooth and nail to get enough money to make it properly. And actually, we had almost two. I remember on that we were in Harrow for a night shoot, and all we shot was man gets out of coach, comes down a set of steps. That was all we shot. And an entire night shoot, sort of flambeaus and all stuff. There's a bit of kit to get in there, actors and extras and a coach and some horses and some flambeau. But basically, whereas on a Doctor Who, we actually had 21 days location filming on that Walls of Fenric. Unheard of. We didn't do any studio in the end. But unheard of. But to squeeze 2.5 hours into 21 days of location is especially it's not easy, and with no money and no one fighting to get more money, I was very fond of these people, incidentally, though. But you do think, please go. Why don't you go and say go?
But despite the trials and tribulations of the show, was Doctor Who quite a fun and challenging one to work on?
Oh, yeah. And one of John Nathan Turner's, he had a lovely sense of humour. I remember. Yeah, there was, again, I don't know how much of this is. These are all controversial stories. In the Walls of Fenric, there was these skulls that had to fall apart. Do you remember? Is that, I can't remember. I think it's been sapped up with digital since, because it was pre-digital. But I remember him saying, it was limp. It wasn't our finest hour, and I'm not. I'm of course I'm the main man, so it's my fault. But it wasn't our finest hour. But there's a number of reasons why it wasn't our finest hour. Talk to the other assistants, and they all know who to blame. But anyway, Steve Bland, who built all these little rigs to spray acetone, to vaporize acetone, to make the skin melt. So the skin was made out of polystyrene, and then a mist of acetone was sprayed over, and then it was supposed to melt back. That's how we did that. And he's vitriolic about someone tinkering with his rig, and then it didn't work. But Jonathan, we shot this thing, and it looked absolutely. It was basically a bit like it went when virtually nothing happened, and then it went after much heaving of a bit of nylon, it went ugh. So yeah, it went ugh, like that. I wonder if it's described on here. Skeletons and slime. It's probably in this described as skeletons and. Oh, here we are. No, Jean and Phyllis decompose. Yeah, it's described as Jean and Phyllis decompose. So we decided just do the heads, and then the heads would decompose. Then we'd do what was rollback mix or whatever it was in those days. So, but we had basically some likenesses of them that then lock off and put in our things with skulls underneath that were going to fall apart, and then lock off and then put dust in and blow it away was the theory. But this wonderful bit, the bit where the acetone sprayed on the polystyrene carved to look like the girls, so all the skin appeared to then just turn to mush. But as I said, Steve, who built the spray rig, was vitriolic about how someone else who was working on it had messed it up by fiddling. And I won't use the name, but the John Nathan Turner said, oh, and here insert name, you've excelled on that one, and that was after it had gone like this, and bits of heaving on a bit of nylon, and then it had gone literally almost nothing. But he had a great sense of humour, old John Nathan Turner.
Your involvement with Doctor Who goes back to the late 70s. So as the
Yeah.
show progressed, was it being what was asked of you more challenging?
Yes, for less money. So ever more challenging. So I think I probably was in the Barry. I must have been in the Barry Letts bits. But yes, so yes, it became the scripts. Obviously, well, the trouble is, of course, Star Wars and things had come out. So which is why Blake 7 came along, and suddenly, from Dixon of Doc Green appearing on the television, pretty much like I'm seeing you with a helmet on, and explaining, and he'd stand in front of a wall and he'd say, "Well, oh my goodness, so we were down at this police station. They'd pick up a phone and say, what dockyard's on fire? 6 ships blown up. Put the phone down. Story told." But with the advent of Star Wars, Towering Inferno, Earthquake, all early 70s films and 69 stuff, Kill His Heroes and so on, great opening sequence with fireballs and stuff. Suddenly, the British punters are expecting to see. It's no good just having Dixon come on and pick up a phone. They're expecting to see the dockyards on fire. So we that's when the thing took off. Really, it went from those guys who'd come off the Radio Caroline ships to as visual, bumbling about, to we had to really get into gear, especially when Blake 7 came along, which is to sort of start rivaling. I mean, the sets are still wobbly. There's some Blake 7 bits. There's that's Paul Darrow. In fact, funny enough, what was I going to? There's other. I've got other little bits here. Your viewers probably would know more what these are than I do. These are various sort of sonic screwdriver type devices that have stayed with me for years. Been in things. What else is in here? Oh, that's quite fun. What's that? That's quite fun. That's just in the box. Is that reading?
Yeah.
It's a Doctor Who pen. I don't know why we had those. Seem to have lots of them. Because I've been around sort of was reasonably well. Now I did have quite used to issue. I got given loads of these things to hand out because often we were rigging ahead of times, so you'd be given armloads of these things, and some actually that's me on that day of that's me on the day of the Shard 10 shoot. So bits of that, a couple of bits of that Dalek are on there.
So a lot of the time, I suppose an effect has to be replicated time and time and again. So there must be a need for quick and easy solutions to be able to reset a lot of these effects.
And these are the things we used to plug in the end of the gun for making the guns go off, because you actually had a physical pyro in there. It wasn't time to join wires, so we did them all. So we made loads of these up. Then you could just take them out the jack socket and plug a new one in, and it would fire.
Talking of Blake 7, you no doubt have come across the producer, Veer Lorimer. How was he to work with?
Well, he was the producer, but the director of this particular episode, I think was so scared, rang in sick the morning of the shoot, so the producer got it, directed it instead. So I can't remember. I do know his name. I used to know. We're talking a lot of time since that shot was taken. On the day, I'm sure that was David Sullivan Proudfoot. Might be wrong. I need to look it up. On the day it was classic producer. Is that a cigar he's holding and stuff? But he ended up directing it because the director never turned up. The director, they were banging on his bedroom door trying to get him out, and he wouldn't come out. Can't remember who it was supposed to be. So the day he looked like that, I looked like that. Which is actually not dissimilar to how you look now.
Well, that's a coincidence, isn't it? That's weird.
Isn't it? Yes. So yes. Oh, that's a lovely one. That was a happy day. Sorry, it's Blake 7 again. Do you see Roy Kinnear there?
Yeah.
Right, that was Roy Kinnear, Paul Darrow. That's I think Steve Pacey in the foreground. That was a waste transfer site somewhere near Poole in Dorset. And that's a shot of all the aliens in the sandpit at somewhere. I don't know if it's the same day. Aliens in the sandpit. So they're all in their causes.
But on The Curse of Fenric, am I right in thinking you found yourself in the costume at one instance?
Yes, I did. And that was for a stunt sequence. Actually, more than one instance. That was, but the main one was when we were doing a stunt sequence where Sophie is she knows the aliens are coming. Ace knows the aliens are coming, so she's backed against the this church wall. Looks much like the wall behind, but with windows, so it's proper stone wall. We had, however, taken a cast of the wall and made a soft plaster version. So there's loads. So it's plaster, but there's a load of sort of fluff in it, basically, called cabasil actually. But so it's fluffy. It means that the plaster is immensely weak. So it's a bit of a nightmare to put this thing up. But it looks like rock, but is in fact, and it's sort of rock, but very weak. And I'm dressed as I will show you the pictures. So there's me getting into costume. So that's me getting into costume, and then after the head has gone in, there I am. Had to smash through the wall. The idea is I smash through the wall. She's not expecting it. She looks horrified. Arm grabs around the neck and drags her back through the wall. Of course, we'd built the wall, and there was a height differential. We'd built it on a natural edge. There was this little step, so we built the wall on this step. Don't know why. Probably the set designer told us to. So build it there. Who knows? We built it on this wall, which meant that I was standing much lower. The floor where I was standing was much lower than the floor where Sophie was standing, even though she was only that far away from me through this soggy wall that we'd created. So when I punched through it, instead of grabbing her around the neck, I actually ended up grabbing her boobs, which is, whether it was on footage anywhere, well, it was recording, so yes, it will be. Whether it was on that roll that famously got wiped, I don't know. I have never seen it. Wouldn't mind seeing it.
You know, Doctor Who is full of aliens and monsters, Daleks, Cybermen, herbivores. Yeah. How do you continually make a Dalek look sinister when it's actually quite a annoying prop, I believe?
Yeah, well, it is. It was never designed for long-term reappearances. Won't go through doors because it's too wide. Hence the Peter Cushing ones being smaller, much more manageable. How do you keep them alive? Well, the Daleks. The secret was with Doctor Who was not to use them too often, wasn't it? That keeps the mystery. And I have to say, I still think these are far more sinister than the modern versions. The modern versions with all the rivets, it's almost like they've stepped back. They look more Wallace and Gromit. These are far more slick without those little stuck-on rivets. These are definitely more space age than the other ones, which are more steampunky. I don't quite know what happened in the concept there. I wasn't party to that discussion. I was involved in the Christopher Eccleston bringing it back, but not that conversation when the Daleks finally returned. This might be of interest to some of your people. It's a very early Doctor Who stalk, and it shows how complex the Doctor Who eye stalk shows how very complex making an eye stalk was, because it comes apart like that, a bit like a 1950s child's toy. So you can imagine making all these bits would take forever. The other funny thing that used to happen, and this you can look if you look at the photographic records, if this came off in the lorry on the way to location, all these bits fell off, they'd often get put back in the wrong order in a hurry because no one could be bothered. So you'd get that sort of scenario, and then that. So by the time we got to this fella, that's an all-in-one. But we got fed up with that, so we made moulds and cast them. So you could get one of these. So as that might, imagine making all those discs and cutting them out and all these bits of aluminium on the dowel. You know, even at high speed, that's a couple of hours work, and then spraying it and so on and so forth. Maybe you got quicker. Maybe you made 10 at once. We never made 10 at once because we never had 10 Daleks. But you can imagine that's quite labour intensive. So just making that and screwing all the balls on and stuff. So actually, some of these bits date back so long, so old. You know, so this is. I can't say looked at because actually it's not real. I know you find that hard to believe, but this isn't real. So it hasn't actually looked at anyone. But this has looked at an awful lot of Doctors going back through the years. And yeah, so by the time we got to this, let's make it. If you look carefully at them, you can see it's made in such a way that it will come out of a 2-part mould. Because making something like so, it's slightly different design to that. But there you go, an interesting stuff from my archive.
When you're working on these shows, Are you aware how special they are to make, or is it just, oh, I've got another day on Doctor Who or Blake 7, or is it quite
No,
exciting?
I mean, I was always pleased. I think I have we've had a pre-chat for the viewers. We have had a pre-chat, and I did say on the pre-chat, I did say you got allocated these. A series would come in. There'd be, I don't know, 7 stories, 10 stories, 8 stories, whatever it was, and they'd spread it around because they were quite hard work, and sometimes they overlapped anyway. So I might be doing camera recce's on one episode, where Steve would be doing some early meetings on the next one. So you never did 2 back-to-back Doctor Who's, or I don't think anyone ever did. As far as I know, no one ever did. Unless someone went sick or something. So you tend to, the season would come in and they'd give one to him, one to him, one to him, one to him. And I always look forward to it. But I'd tell you what, I'd say 80% of the guys didn't look forward to it because there was not enough money, it was hard work, and you knew it was going to be kick, bollock, scramble. But I quite like kick, bollock, scramble, and it's good fun. And you do have surround yourself with a nice team, and your own. You pick your team of people from the board, and you can go off and have a lot of fun. And we did have a lot of fun. So,
Well, I hope you've enjoyed the first part of my chat with Graham. In part 2, we talk about blowing up Daleks, how the industry has changed, but also perhaps what not to say to Ronnie Barker on set, and plenty more besides.